Hi, everyone. Welcome to our bird webinar. My name is Allison Lewis, and this is Casey Jensen. We're here to talk about birds. So, yeah, we get it going.
We're going to kind of give you an overview of what we've been doing as our part of the data collection for the Thousand Farms Initiative. And most everyone here, everyone here knows what that is. Some of the folks from the public may not, so just a real quick overview. How do I make it go forward?
There you go. Arrow down there.
Okay. So the Thousand Farms Initiative was and is an effort that was set out to see how utilizing science, working with landowners on functioning farms that are doing regenerative work, could direct the change and evolution of agriculture in the country by applying the scientific method. Now, this is an old slide. I couldn't find a newer one in 2024, but you can see we're going out to different farms around the country, from the Pacific Northwest to New England to Florida to the southwestern U.S. and collecting collecting data on lots of different farms in completely different growing systems, from rangelands.
Yep.
As part of this initiative, we go out to all these farms and we collect this data from soils and water microbes down to looking at bacteria and birds in the system. How do I change? Okay. And so we go out and we set up transects, and the folks that do the plants and the soil and insects, they work along these transect lines and collect their data. Meanwhile, I'm in the upper left-hand corner here. I usually go in the opposite direction of where these guys are, because they're creating a lot of disturbance and noise, and they scare the birds. So we go to where they're not scaring. Mm-hmm. And so geographically, now we've been collecting data. Well, I'll let you read it, but it's a lot of places, a lot of states that we've been working in. Here's an example of mixed vegetable farm in Arizona. And here's a vermilion flycatcher that we saw on that mixed vegetable farm in Arizona. And a phainopepala that was present on those mixed vegetable farms. We worked last fall in Arizona and rangelands there. Do I just hit the down button?
Yep.
Okay, I can do that. And so I think you get the idea. We're going out to these systems. Some are mixed vegetables, some are orchards of a variety of different, and I could have added now onto that mangoes and avocados. Traditional row crop, commodity crops, and then in rangelands, we've got native range that's never been plowed. We've got others that have been seeded in with tame grasses, and so we kind of split it up by where the grass is coming from, and then also what's grazing, whether it's cattle or sheep or goats. And then last year we kind of dove into looking at rangelands were being used, or silvopatch actually under trees, for hogs and chickens for poultry. So a lot of different systems we're looking at. Now I want to just quickly focus on some data. And this is from California almonds, because we collected a lot of data in 1 year there in 2022. Allison and I went out there several times and collected data in all seasons: winter, spring, summer breeding, fall migration. So we had several trips, and we crunched through all that data. You can see there's birds that live in almond groves. And the takeaway from all that was, in almonds, no matter the season, the almond orchards are providing some habitat. Even when the trees are dormant in the winter. In fact, in the wintertime, they may actually have the highest abundance of some wintering birds and things that really surprised me. I've never seen meadowlarks gather together in flocks, but in winter in California almond trees, you see flocks of 50 and 60 of them. I've never seen that in my cruise. And so they attract a wide variety of birds. And when you compare the regenerative orchards to the traditional orchards, they had about 25% more species. And where the kind of the rubber, I think, really hit the road is in the total abundance of birds, depending upon, again, the time of the year, up 3 to 5 times as many birds. Okay, so the take home, I guess, lesson from that is regenerative orchards do the trick in terms, if you're a bird and you're looking for a place to be in the wintertime, an almond orchard is not a bad place to be. And if you think about it, if you're a bird and you're looking here at a regenerative orchard, you've got ground cover, you've got some structure, habitat structure in the trees, you could probably make a living there depending on the kind of bird you are, compared to a conventional one. If you're a bird here, you got to pack a lunch. There's nothing to eat. Okay. So, I mean, this isn't like rocket science here. If you're something that's living and requires a system to live in, the orchard on the left is much more inviting, life-giving than the one on the right. So that's some data I wanted to give to you. But the basis of kind of the rest of this talk today is to talk about what birds need. So if you've got a farm or you've got a ranch or you've got a backyard, what can you do to make it more attractive to birds? Okay? And it comes down to 3 basic needs that all living things have. Okay? Us, sheep out here, birds, mice. You need sustenance, which is food and water. You need security. You don't want to get eaten, right? You need to be able to hide from predators. And you need to stay within your thermoneutral zone, need comfort, right? You don't want to get too hot. You don't want to get too cold. So you need a place that's going to provide all those resources. Okay, and so the more of that you can provide, the more species of birds and the more numbers of birds, pure numbers of birds. So here's an example. This broad-billed hummingbird we saw last fall out in the middle of Tucson, Arizona, in a little mixed vegetable plot. And it was going from little nectar plot to nectar plot and getting its fill for the day. Or this summer tanager down in a rangeland field in Oklahoma last year at about 100 degrees. This could find a place to be comfortable. So I'm going to break these down: food sustenance, security, and comfort. You want to take part of it?
Yeah. So sustenance and food, that depends on what time of year it is too. So in the winter, they need more carbs because you gotta stay warm. But right now during the migration, they're gonna need more insects because they need more protein because they're gonna be making eggs, and then soon they're gonna be rearing the chicks, getting ready to fledge out and fly and find their own food too. So having that time of year, the different food for each time of year is extremely important. And knowing what time of year the birds are there and what they need is going to be extremely important. You can see a cardinal here eating seeds, and it looks like it's actually last year's sunflower. So they didn't get eaten right away. Now it can have that this spring, kind of a little bit more fuel for them to have and things to eat. And a hummingbird's going to need more nectar, so flower sources, or if you have a hummingbird feeder in your backyard, like I will have soon, this is great for them to have. The black Burnham warbler, they're more insectivore, yeah, and so they're going to eat a lot of bugs. So if you have anything that, you know, I'm saying in a pine tree right now, but bugs, it's a great food source for them. So if you got plants that can have bugs that they'll eat or just provide some cover for them as well. Thistles, hummingbirds love thistles because they'll eat the nectar, and then finches actually like them in the fall for their seed sources. Yellow face grass squid. You can actually see he's sitting on a really good food patch right there. That grass has a lot of seeds for him to eat. So that's really good to see. This is a tail flycatcher. They fit their name. They like going after the flying bugs. So you'll see them swooping around, going after big insects in the air and sitting on, you know, barbed wire fences and nibbling on things. Yellow warblers, they're pollen eaters too,
They're
correct?
pollinators as well as
Mhm.
bug eaters, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll pollinate for you, but they'll also eat the pollen. They'll go from tree to tree, spreading that around, and then yeah, they'll eat the smaller insects for you to help keep the pests down on your orchards. Common yellow throat or common yellow throat. They're also pollinators, or no, not really. Insectivores, yeah. So they'll help you out as well with the insects. Yeah.
Okay, in terms of security, the big thing is you don't want to get eaten. So you need to either be able to hide or blend in. Okay, you have to somehow escape the predation event, and this is going to be species specific. Depending on what you are, depends on how you react to it, right? And so the habitat, again, the more diverse the structure, the more the ability of the bird to utilize that. So you've got a bald eagle overhead. This was up in Montana, a trip we made a few years ago. He's looking for a meal. Okay. So if you're this Cassin sparrow, you could just disappear into that sage. Okay. That's being pretty secure. Or this Canada warbler up in Maine can, once they get in the shade under like in an orchard, they can and just sit still. They actually are really, really difficult to see. So it's providing some security for them. Or in the case of wren tits out in California, they are super camouflaged for the environment in which they live. And some birds just like living dangerously, I guess. Okay. In terms of comfort, okay, this is, you gotta, we all have a thermal neutral zone. Okay. In here today, I'm reaching maybe the upper limit of one. So, but we don't want to be too hot. We don't want to be too cold. In terms of birds, they can withstand a whole lot on the lower end of that. They can withstand very cold temperatures as long as they have enough food to process to create energy. They have a very thin window at the top. They can get too hot really fast. They have a really high body temperature anyway at about 106 to 107 degrees naturally. And anything that gets above that, they stroke out. They're kind of dead.
They're toast. Yeah.
They're toast. So You also need protection from weather, from rain, hail, snow, wind, like yesterday.
Mhm.
I drove out here and back yesterday. I didn't see many birds. Okay. I want to kind of reiterate in terms of comfort and security, those things kind of are married, right? The same thing that's making them secure is also a place where they usually can find the resources they need to be comfortable. I threw this in here. This was a traditional maize field, cornfield, for the tribal people down in New Mexico. They had our technicians out there collecting data. That was a hot, stinking day. Hot. Hot. Okay. But this black-headed grosbeak could find some shade in the shrubs at the edge of that, and they would actually fly out into the corn, and they were picking up insects. And in fact, I saw hummingbirds going into that traditional corn and eating pollen. Never seen it before in my life, pollen eating hummingbirds. And then when they flood irrigated there, all of a sudden the ibises showed up to probe in the soil. Here's another example of a meadowlark living in not very much cover out up in the Texas Panhandle. Hot day. They're really built to blend in. If you look at their back, they can just get in that grass and hide. Okay. Or you got this egret that's catching a ride in a pecan orchard. So up there, it can see danger. Some birds actually like to be able to see if something's coming. And it's white, you're not going to hide. Okay? If that bird can't really hide. So what it relies on its ability to see danger, see a threat, and leave. Okay. So riding on the cow has two benefits. I can see more, and I can pick some of the insects off the back of the cow too. Again, this is a thermal regulation. This was last summer, right outside of Boulder, Colorado. Again, about 100-degree day. And this young red-tailed hawk was in this huge cottonwood at the edge of the mixed vegetable plot. Wings out, mouth open, felt like I did. Okay. It was hot, but it found a place to get away from that. Okay, you want to talk about this?
Well, different birds need different nesting habitats. So the red tail that we just saw, they're nesting in trees. Where you're gonna have the meadowlark that we had 3 slides ago. They want grasslands. They make actually a little tunnel in the grass, and that's where they nest. So all birds are gonna need a different structure. So having a range of habitat, so you have shrubs, you have trees, you have grass, having that provides different nesting habitat for everything. And not only that, yeah, it protects them from the weather and like the sun, getting out of the sun, because the chicks, they need that too when they're getting raised up. But here's some mourning doves that are actually in the almond trees out in California. Nice shaded spot to keep them nice and cool when it gets very hot. And they found just a little cubby. This is actually probably the best mourning dove nest I've ever seen. They usually just find a rock pile on the ground and call it good enough. So this is actually a really nice nest. Blueberry net catchers, they like the shrubs as well. Provides good cover for them. They blend in well once they get into that shade or the cover of the trees. You can't see them because they're that nice gray, so they blend in super well. Northern Barwell. They also are more tree liking. Though that provides good cover for them. I think they nest in a tree too, correct? Or
Yeah.
And then you have bluebirds, which a lot of you probably know about bluebird houses or set one out, and that provides a good spot for them. You can naturally do that yourself, or if you got a down tree, it's got holes in it, that provides perfect cover for them. Just let it be. You know, some of us have the urge to go cut it up, make firewood. I have that urge sometimes too, but that can also provide a good structure for these guys to have nesting, but not only them, but woodpeckers, it's food source and nesting for them. Another nesting box lover is the barn owl. It's out in California. A lot of the almond growers out there are putting up nesting boxes because they're hoping to encourage these guys then to help with their varmint control. So all the little rodents running around, these guys in the night go around, help them do that. So they're providing habitat for them and food source and some security for them.
Okay. So we're kind of talking quite a bit about nesting here because it's the one time of the year where birds are geographically and physically tied to a spot. Okay, if you have a nest, you can't really leave if things get bad or food goes away because you're stuck there because you've got eggs to incubate and babies to rear, right? And so food at that time becomes really, really important. And if you're a growing individual, a vertebrate growing individual, you need protein. So the 2x4s and nails that put together body structures. And in the natural world, protein comes from bugs. It comes from insects. They also need the habitat that's going to provide the comfort part, shade, warmth, protection from rain and wind. And so we're out looking, and here's during the nesting season, I got all these photographs of, here's a chipping sparrow carrying a caterpillar. Black-throated green warbler carrying a caterpillar. Yellow-billed cuckoo carrying a caterpillar. Okay, they're really good at finding these things. Okay, so that habitat is providing the resources that they need. Sometimes they have to provide their own comfort. So here's a Canada goose mom on a warm day shading her babies. So she's actually providing the shade. Or if you're a swallowtail kite, you can get up and you can, again, see and hunt to provide food sources. So raptors maybe have a little more option because they're a little bit more mobile during that period of time. Okay, so in the winter, what happens is food is important, but you're not tied to one spot, right? So you can move around, but escape cover becomes fairly important because in the wintertime, what happens to birds? In the summer, they're all spread out. They have their own territories. In the wintertime, they all flock together. And so if you're a raptor or a coyote, you go to where the flocks of birds are, right? So those flocks need some places to disappear. And food and fuel, if you're migrating, you need energy. And so energy comes in the form of carbohydrates. Okay, protein builds muscle and tissue. Energy comes from burning carbs or storing fat and then burning that up. The best way to store a lot of fat is to eat a lot of carbs. Right? So all of a sudden, these birds that are eating insects in the spring and summer make a dietary shift and they're eating seeds. And so if you have a bare bones dirt bed to an almond orchard, there's no seeds. There's nothing to eat, which tells us why we saw so many more in the regenerative orchards, right? And so you get all of these birds that, like white-crowned sparrows, lots and lots and lots in just about every orchard I've been in. Almonds, apples, rangelands, you see them. Chickadees that are working the edges of these forage spots in Oklahoma. Now, some of these birds, like chickadees, don't migrate. Okay, so we have migratory birds and some that don't migrate. These do not. And so they need to find all of that stuff for year round wherever they live. This black and white warbler up in Maine, in an apple orchard in Maine. I think it was the one apple orchard we visited, John. Yeah. It was the birdiest spot ever.
There's like 40 different varieties.
Yeah, yeah. Well, red-breasted nuthatches that migrate, but they eat a lot of seeds in the winter time. Oh. And of course, wrens, which are bug eaters. Whoops. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about management. Okay, so you got sustenance, security, and comfort, the things that the animals need. So how does your decisions operationally, whether it's your backyard or your orchard, okay, or your vegetable farm, how does that going to affect bird use? So you need to consider the system type you're working with, whether it's an orchard or it's rangeland or it's cropland. But remember those three basic needs that you're trying to provide. By providing something, you don't have to do them all, but the more the better. It's like regenerative practices. There's a bunch of them, and doing a few is better than doing none, right? And so these practices of providing sustenance, security, and comfort, a few of them is better than none, right? You can provide, because birds are pretty mobile. They can move from spot to spot and find what they need. And just as a kind of a thing to remember, the edges of the field become really vital. Fence lines, shrubs on the other side of the fence, things like that get utilized a lot. So here's ground doves in Florida. They're not eating the citrus, but there's grasses growing, annual grasses growing in the aisles in between, and the doves are just gobbling those seeds. Or quail, this on our recent California trip, the quail were utilizing the weedy edges of some of those pastures, and they were also using these live oak trees as shade, which is pretty cool. They left some of the big trees in the pasture, I think for shade for their cattle, but quail use it too. Or this mountain chickadee in Colorado, and they don't migrate, but could find everything that's needed next to that mixed vegetable plot. Or here in where we live, black-capped chickadees, they're doing the same thing. Kingbirds in California, insect eaters, but they can make a nice living in an almond orchard. Okay. So again, how does your operational decision affect bird use? And structure, habitat structure, becomes really vital at that point. And if you have structures, physical structures, they'll use it. And, you know, I understand the need or the want to get rid of some fence lines because it makes farming hard in some cases. But I can tell you this, every fence line I go down, I see birds. Okay, I'm just going to put through them quick. Universally, birds use fences. It's a perch. They can get up, they can see if something's coming to eat them, they can see if there's insects to eat. So scissor-tail flycatchers use fences. Magpies use fences. Eastern kingbirds use fences. Dick sizzles use fences. Phoebes, another flycatcher, uses fences. Lark sparrows use fences. Bluebirds use fences. Fences become pretty important. Okay. Now, more Phoebes. Shrikes, which are kind of predators. I can tell you some raptors use fences too. You know, kestrels like to sit on fence posts. So if you're thinking about ripping out fence lines, I would have a debate with myself. Is not only does a fence line provide some perches, but it's kind of hard. It gets a little messy underneath. the grasses, the annual and perennials like to grow along fences. And maybe aesthetically you don't like that, but I can tell you the birds do because there's food there. Insects live there, seeds grow there. So maybe we just need to think a little bit about aesthetically what's different. Okay. So, Allison will talk a little bit about residual cover.
Yeah.
And keeping residual cover in your field.
So gardening and stuff like that, there's always an urge to rip everything out from last year. Or like even when you have a dead tree in an orchard, you just want to rip it out. It's not great to do that. Yeah, this doesn't look pretty, I get it. But that holds insects, that provides cover, that provides so many different things for these birds to live in and to use. So Savannah sparrow will use that. They'll just push all the grass aside. Now that's their nesting spot, last year's grass. So leaving that, not grazing it too hard and letting them, let your cows or sheep and everyone eat that up or even burning it, leaving some areas like this because grassland birds love that for nesting habitat. Pheasants, pheasant hunter and they.
If you're interested in game birds, leave residual cover on the ground, period.
It's not only for them, but it's for their chicks. Their chicks can go and hide in there. That's perfect for them. And kind of the rule of thumb that DC has taught me is if you can walk and shuffle your feet, that's perfect. You want that enough cover for them so they can hide, especially their chicks, because that's what they need to hide from the predators flying above that are scare them. But you don't want it too thick though either. So having good grazing where it's moving through or clearing a little bit of it out, that's good.
It's a good rule of thumb. What I told like my upland game bird students is if you take a football and you throw it out into a piece of grass and it kind of disappears. That's enough cover. It doesn't have to be super high. Okay.
And bobwhite quail would fall in that same category. They're a little bit smaller than a pheasant, so don't need nearly as much, but they love that ground cover, the grass from them. That's perfect for them. Wrens, they will perch on the reeds and cattails from last year. It's a great perch for them so they can see. And then actually red-winged blackbirds use old cattails and they'll make a nest. They'll put a few of them together and that's where they make their nest.
So do the marsh wrens.
Yep. So those guys, the marsh birds, that's very vital for them.
Sorry.
No, you're
Marsh wrens are really cool. Because they're polygynous in that one male will mate with several females. But the male will build several nests in these old cattails, 5 or 6 nests, kind of dummy ones. It's like putting the frame up on a house, not finished off, but just kind of started. And then he'll court a female. And they go around and she'll inspect all those houses and pick the one she wants. And then they'll work on it a little bit together and then she'll finish that nest. Meanwhile, he's off, showing off for another female. And they go out and look at the other nest. And this will happen, maybe he'll have 2, maybe he'll have 3 mates. But these residual cattails make that possible. Sorry.
No, it's perfect. Indigo buntings too, yeah. Everyone needs that residual from last year, like that cover that provides for them. That's what they need. Not all of them, but a lot of them do need something from last year to make their nests, provide cover for them. Very, very important. Woodlands.
Yeah. So structure generally is what birds are looking for. There's a few that are looking for species specific things, but generally they're looking for structure. Does this provide the structure I need or the levels I need? That black Vernian warbler in Maine, it only lives in the tops of trees. So it needs trees tall enough that it feels comfortable up there. There's other warblers that only live in the mid-story and others that live down low. So if you don't have all that structure, you're kind of missing out on what is possible. So species diversity for plants not only provides really good stuff for insects to grow and thrive, to provide food for birds. It's their main role, right? Well, no, but it's one of their functions. But things that might produce mast, seeds, or fruit become really, really valuable. And again, it provides all that habitat for insects. So these painted buntings down in Oklahoma, they love those shrubby edges. They can fly out in the openings and gather insects where the cows are grazing, and then they can retreat back into that structure and hide and get away. All mockingbirds, which are pretty strict insect eaters, but they still need structure to hide in. And almond orchards actually provide, there's a lot of mockingbirds in almond orchards. Blue grosbeaks, this was in a pastured pork farm. We were in North Carolina. These guys were out sweating their butts off. I was talking with the landowners, and we had a great time. Catbirds, they're also mainly insect and mast eaters. Around here with catbirds in the fall, if I catch catbirds to put bands on them in August, my hands are purple by the end of the day, because they switch. They're eating buckthorn berries, and they're eating choke cherries. They love fruit, and that goes through them really quickly. They'll stain your hands, stain your clothes, stain everything. Orioles are the same way. They're mainly insect and fruit eaters, but right now in my feeders, they're eating jelly. I'm cheating. Cheap. I'm giving them cheap, probably nutritionally empty food, but it does provide some energy at least to them, right? But I wanted to talk a little bit. I had never seen anything like this. And I don't know what the right term for it is, but I just call it layered orchards that we experienced in Puerto Rico. From things like shade coffee on the left that's growing underneath, to citrus or avocado or mango or other fruit trees that are kind of above that, and then to taller trees like bananas and coconuts. And you're getting all of these crops out of the same piece of ground. Okay. It's also providing all of this structure from low stuff to tall stuff for birds. And the abundance, or I'd say the diversity and abundance, but mainly diversity of birds that we saw in these systems. Floored me. It just floored me. So up in the top, so you have these anis, these dinosaur-looking things. They would go down low too, but they like being up on top where they could kind of see what's going on around them. Down underneath near the ground, you had their little Puerto Rican national bird, the toady, about the size of a hummingbird. Great. I found out later they're actually related to kingfishers. And they burrow holes in the side of the ground, just like kingfishers. Hummingbirds. Not a lot of species there, but a lot of individuals. Curly-eyed thrashers. These really cool birds that like to stay in the dense stuff. And then the ubiquitous, every habitat I went in there had bananas. Mixed vegetable gardens, coffee plantations, city parks, you name it, they have banana cliffs. They're really, really adaptable. So with all that, I guess I would like to thank Ecdysis here for allowing me to be able to do this and work with all you guys. But we couldn't do it without support from a lot of different organizations and the great people we work with. It's a lot of fun. Okay. So if you want to get a hold of us, for those of you out there, Allison and my email are here, or you can always get a hold of Don if you have questions he can't answer, he can direct you to one of us.
Yeah.
So with that, thanks, and I take any questions anybody might have. Yeah, Caleb.
Is there a way that when you guys are sampling in regenerative or conventional or transitional sites to look at whether the species of birds are taking stress behaviors? Or do you monitor that or look at that?
So the question was, do we monitor stress of birds in the different systems, whether it's conventional or regenerative?
Stress?
Yeah, stress.
The answer would be no. There are ways to measure stress, but you need to be able to handle individual birds to do that. And we're not equipped to do that. But there are stress hormone levels, and depending on the time of the year, you can actually see stress bars in their feathers when they're molting new feathers. If they get real nutritionally stressed at some point, there'll be a weak spot in the feather as it grows out. They also, and if it's like chronic stress, what you find is that they lay fewer eggs, or they may start nesting and then fail. Those are also stress responses. But I don't know a way to do it without following individuals.
And it could also change depending on the time of year too. If we were catching them during the migration, well, stress could be from where they were wintering. And now if we're seeing the stress now in their feathers after they did a molt, maybe they didn't have enough food. Or if we catch them on the fall migration or in the summer, what stressors are there? So it could depend also on the time of year.
Could you go through for vegetables, rangelands, orchards, and row crops? If a farmer were to ask us what they, like a simple thing they could do to help their birds, in each of those systems, what's like one of the easiest things any farmer could do to help birds?
Leave fence lines.
Mhm.
Okay. Don't spray. That would be, or reduce the amount of spraying.
Mhm.
And don't let your feral cat out.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's my,
Mhm.
again, this is me speaking. I'm not speaking on behalf of Ecdysis. This is me. Feral cats kill 1.3 billion birds a year in the US. That's a lot of birds. So but leave fence lines in. Birds like messy,
Mhm.
you know, like just an example, growing up, our cornfields were messy because we cultivated mechanically rather than sprayed. And so in the row where you didn't cultivate grew all these annual grasses. And in the fall, pheasants just flocked into the cornfields, not for the corn, but for all of the annual grasses that lived in the corn. That no longer exists. And so it takes a mindset to put up with messy, you know, and a lot of the farmers I know, my brothers included, don't like messy. They like straight lines,
Mhm.
they like clean edges. But from a bird standpoint, that doesn't offer anything. Yeah, John.
Two questions. First off, if you have cats, is there anything you can do in order to provide habitat or keep the birds somewhat safer?
Well, I mean, there are a few things. One would be if you have outside cats and you have bird feeders, place the bird feeders far enough away from cover that a cat could hide in,
Okay.
that it gives the bird a chance. And for local like homeowners, that's usually about 15 feet. They say, I mean, it's really nice to put it right next to the shrubs because the birds feel comfortable, they're secure, they can eat and they go right back.
Mhm.
But it's also a really good place for an ambush predator. That would be one thing. Some people swear by putting bells
Mhm.
on the cats, just so the birds know.
Yeah.
You know, and that might help some. I don't know any studies that have looked at that, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Unless you have a smart cat who's like, oh, I can't hunt with this bell, and then rips it off. Because they do that frequently. So it could help at least short term, if nothing else, get them through the main season.
And then, we used to have barn swallows over on the other path that took their mosquitoes away from the farm. They aren't back yet this year.
The cliff walls.
With swallows, whichever species.
I just saw them today for the first time
Do you think they're late
on
coming
the
home?
bridge on the Big Sioux River.
Thank goodness. Is
That
there
was-
anything we can do to encourage them?
Today was the first day I saw
Okay. Anything else we can do on our property to make sure they have some habitat?
them. You know, barn swallows in particular love ledges, wood ledges, like in your barns, which is why they're named that way. Yeah, leave them, you know, let them, unless they're pooping right in your watering trough, you know, then you don't want that.
Yeah. Will they come back year after year?
Yeah. I banded barn swallows at my place. I have a lot of them. And I get returns. The birds are remarkable at coming back to one little patch of woods. I've got rose-breasted grosbeaks at Baltimore that come back 7 years.
Oh.
So you got this bird that goes to South America and it comes back to this 5-acre woodlot in South Dakota every year. Pretty remarkable. Yeah, I agree.
You were talking about spraying. I'm wondering, okay, if there will be affected by like indirect effects of pesticides on the environment, like for example, reducing number of dogs or reducing the coverage. But I'm wondering how sensitive are birds to direct effects?
Yeah, it's both.
Both.
Actually.
Or which one do you think is more predominant or more?
I
Or you think?
couldn't tell you that, but I know they can be killed directly by ingesting an insect that's been sprayed or just getting the spray on them. And then they preen their feathers and then
The sprays on their
the
feathers.
sprays
And then
on them. Most little birds that, well, I don't want to say that, little precocial birds like chickens and turkeys and ducks that run around, mom doesn't feed them. Mom just takes them to where the food is. Okay, so they're finding their own food and mom's just providing some protection. When they're really little, I can tell this for pheasants and quail, that primary food early on is ants because they're on the ground. Anything above like 4 inches is unavailable to them. Okay, if you're a baby bird, it's got to be down there low. And so ants become a big part of their. Now they grow really fast. You know, in 10 days, you know, pretty much everything is available. But most of the mortality occurs in those first 10 days. So anything that would wipe out that insect layer at the ground level becomes really problematic.
And they avoid the iron
Abort?
avoid. For example, for us, I don't know, sometimes we can get smell or something that birds can
avoid.
Avoid.
avoid that at some point, do you know? Or
I don't know. Birds don't have a very good sense of smell, number one, or taste. Which, you know, if you watch a great horned owl eating a road-killed skunk, I imagine it doesn't taste very good or smell very good. They're pretty immune to it. There's a couple of exceptions to that, but most we have in the neighborhood of like 100,000 taste buds or 25,000. Catfish have like 1 million. Birds have 25. They they eat fruit that would pucker us inside out. That, it's that raw, no big deal with them. Same with smell. Unless you're a vulture that finds your food by smell, or a seabird that finds it by smelling fish at the surface. But most don't. Odor is not a thing. Although it's an area that probably hasn't been studied a whole lot. Maybe it plays a bigger role than we know. But the thought is it's not. Vision, however.
To certain, well, so if there's one type of pest bug for plants or a crop, and there's like 1,700 beneficial bugs, how does the bird bug relationship go? Will the birds eat more of the pest bugs or like kind of equal?
So the question Bobby asked was if you've got insects that are like pest insects, and you also have all these beneficial insects, if I understand this right, do the birds preferentially go after the pests rather than, and the answer I think probably is not preferentially. Birds will take what's most available. And so if there is huge numbers of pest insects, that's going to be, in fact, the Mormons in the Salt Lake Valley have statues built to California gulls because,
You told me that before.
yeah, they planted their crops and the Mormon crickets came and were eating them up, and all of a sudden the clouds of gulls showed up and ate all the crickets. Well, it's because there was lots of crickets, I think. But I've also seen golden eagles, which I never would have thought would eat insects, walking in a field in Montana, pluck, 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 pluck. And I walked out there, and it was like Moses parting the Red Sea with grasshoppers. I mean, just a plague of grasshoppers. And so that eagle didn't have to, why go hunt something big when I can just take a walk here and eat dim sum, So birds are really good at kind of optimizing, forage optimizing, really good at it. So.
Does anyone online have any questions?
Hey, Casey and Allison, I have maybe a practical question. If you are a rancher and you're trying to graze regeneratively, so you're looking at, high stock densities and moving animals.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for somebody to do in the springtime when, say, the birds are at a vulnerable stage for the grassland species that are nesting down on the ground? What do you recommend to balance between what's good for the birds and what's good for your livestock or your land?
Well, I mean, my answer to that is if you're rotating, you have to have a pasture that you're rotating in at that time of the year. But I would rotate, I wouldn't put it in that same spot in the year every year. It's right now, for instance, there's a lot of prescribed burning going on in grasslands, which is really important. But all that residual cover that the birds are looking for to nest in, when you do a prescribed burn, that's gone. But the long-term goal is to make that a healthier habitat. So for that year, you're saying I'm going to sacrifice that production in this pasture or this plot. And I would say the same thing for somebody that's rotationally grazing, is that, you know what, this plot, we're not going to have a lot of nesting in, but that same plot in a month may provide really good foraging habitat for things that like open country, pool table, open things like horned larks or upland sandpipers, that like to forage in that really open environment. So having some structural diversity isn't a bad thing. It's just that you probably can't get everything, have your cake and eat it too, right? So to speak.
When I was in North Dakota, when we were looking at burning and then grazing with how bird nesting was, cows were actually surprisingly good at avoiding nests. I think we only had one or two get trampled by cows, and that was probably when they were moving them in, and like we scared them, so they rushed through an area. Or a coyote did the same thing. That was the only time we really saw them destroy a nest, and it was maybe a duck, and it was early enough so she could re-nest. But for the most part, even a meadow lark who's in the ground, we could barely find it with knowing it was there. We couldn't find it. Never saw one squished. And of all the ones we found, they were avoided. So I don't know if the cows or animals inherently know, oh, there's something there. I got to step over a little bit, or just pure luck. But we rarely saw nests get damaged, even with cattle in there.
So I guess the answer to Ryan would be, tell them not to worry about it.
Thanks, guys.
Don't worry too much, at least. Yeah. Don't fret over it.
I mean, it's nice that they're thinking of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got another question. Is there a correlation then between if you're doing healthy grazing techniques and bird population? Like, does it, if in a place that has been like overgrazed and there's less birds, less water, less grasses?
Well, we're trying to find that out,
Yeah.
but we also know from a lot of studies on birds and grasslands that there are some species that like really what we would call overgrazed,
Okay.
but they're very few. And there are lots of them everywhere. So it's not species that we care. I don't want to say we don't care a lot, but from a population standpoint, they're doing fine. There are also birds that really like the tall, thick stuff, but it's just a few species. And then there's others that kind of like that middle ground. There's more of them. And so once it gets too tall for some of them, they disappear. So once it gets too short for some of them, they disappear. But the point is, in like a good rotational system, you've got some of all of that. You know, and if you think about it, they evolved with that. You know, as these large bison herds moved, there would be areas that were just pool table, right? And then others that they may have moved through fast or didn't hit, and it probably was a mosaic, okay, more than like monoculture. And then there was recovery time before all that stuff happened again. So that was the evolution of these grassland birds at least. And so trying to mimic that on the scale that we're working is tough. It's tough.
Casey, I got one question.
Yeah.
In the regenerative farms that you have observed, is there something that stood out to you in the regenerative versus the conventional? For example, like, have you seen like more of the species in the regenerative compared to the conventional, or more diversity?
So they asked if in regenerative orchards, if we saw, this would be my impression,
Yeah.
is we haven't really looked at that data, more species and more individuals. Well, we did in California almonds, okay, because I've analyzed that data. My gut tells me, just from what I've seen, that in the regeneratively managed grasslands that we've worked in, it has a fuller suite of birds that I would expect to see in that environment. Okay, where things that aren't managed that way, the diversity is different. It may be, and if you just look at species numbers, okay, maybe they had pretty equal, but they didn't have like the whole suite of it. Does that make sense? There's species diversity, or yeah, there's evenness and diverse. So if you have 10 species and 100 birds, right? If you had 10 species and 10 of each species, that's 100. So that's like this more equal thing. But if you had 10 species, 90 of one and one of everything else, that's a different.
Yeah.
that's a different, you still got 10 species. But how that looks in a community is different. What I see, what I think I see, is in the communities that are regeneratively managed, we see that more even kind of suite of birds that, again, this is just kind of a gut feeling.
Sydney has a question. I know wetlands are essential habitat for waterfowl and migratory birds, especially in South Dakota. How can we utilize these habitats and protect them well, especially in agriculture spaces?
Don't drain them.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't drain them. That's the only thing I can say. That also is, I drove to Pier on Wednesday, and it breaks my heart every time I get past Woolsey and drive to Highmore. It wasn't very many years ago where that was all rangeland on both sides, and there were little wetlands and cattle dugouts, to provide water. And so now that's all corn soybean rotation. They've gone in and they no-tilled, sprayed, and put in wall to wall. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of acres. And as a result of that, they got rid of the little wetlands that were there and the stock tanks. So the wetlands went from being an asset to the rancher to being an impediment to the farmer. Okay, and so, man, if we can keep grass on the ground, then those wetlands usually can take care of themselves because they're an asset. They're keeping water, and cows like them generally. So, but don't drain them. Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Data center.
You have a data center attempting to come to Leavenworth, currently in Kansas. This is a large tract of land they're looking at. Purpose, they want to build 1,000 acres of ag land currently in rangelands. What resources or suggestions can you give to the state to importance of birds in the habitat? Scissor-tails, flycatchers are there, yeah.
In terms of these regulatory actions and policy, all I can say is put lots of pressure on your local lawmakers. And try to organize people. Maybe they listen to you, maybe they don't, but I'd feel better, at least for trying. But those are hard things, because on one side, people dangle a lot of money that you're going to employ people and make this community better. On the other hand, I don't know why the data center and cropland would go to. I don't understand the correlation to that. There probably is something. I know that with the data centers, there's a lot of worry about water usage.
Water usage, yeah, they're taking up a lot of land, and then EMFs and everything else.
So,
Yeah, if anyone's done any surveys in the area that you know of, Audubon or any of the universities done anything in the area, you can reach out to them and see if they've done that's crucial habitat for anything too. Bobwhite quail would be another thing to look at.
unless the prairie chickens, depending on where it
Yeah.
happens, because then now you've got federal teeth,
Yep. We are not
at least under some administrations. But lesser prairie chickens are federally have some federal protection.
Yeah, so the state would probably know if there's any lekking grounds or anything there. I would talk with the state and see if that's an area that would need protecting. That'd probably be good resources to reach out to, or if they can start doing surveys there to try to make it a protected area. That would probably help give you some more teeth. So they're in Leavenworth is where it is, Leavenworth County. Do we have any more questions?
All right, thanks, folks. If you got questions, you can always get a hold of us.
Yeah.
So appreciate it.